In the second half of the 9th century, the lands of the early Rus stood at a crossroads. Trade routes expanded, wealth flowed across rivers and forests, and distant connections, from Scandinavia to Byzantium and the Islamic world, grew stronger. Yet beneath this apparent prosperity lay deep instability. This period, roughly between 860 and 871, reveals a fragile and volatile political landscape. Violence, migration, and shifting power structures disrupted established centers, while new opportunities reshaped societies. In this video, we will explore how instability did not simply destroy, but also transformed, the early Rus, laying the foundations for a more structured political order. The precise location of the main stronghold of the Khagan of the Rus remains debated. However, strong evidence suggests it was situated near Lake Ilmen, south of what would later become Novgorod. This site was not merely a settlement, it was a strategic hub. Fortified early on and surrounded by satellite communities, it controlled major trade and communication routes, north toward Ladoga, east toward the Volga headwaters, south toward the western Dvina. Its geographical position allowed it to dominate regional exchange networks. The site known today as Ryarikovo Gorodishchi may even correspond to descriptions from Arabic sources of a vast, marshy island, where the Rus ruler resided. It was likely here that a Byzantine religious mission was sent in the early 860s, an indication that this center held both political and symbolic importance. Shortly before this mission, a dramatic event shook the region. A Rus fleet attacked Constantinople, devastating its suburbs. Although the fleet was later destroyed by a storm, the assault demonstrated both ambition and coordination among Rus leaders. In response, the Rus themselves requested a Byzantine mission, possibly seeking religious conversion or diplomatic alignment. The mission aimed to convert the ruler and elite, suggesting a moment of openness to external influence. However, this period also saw increasing instability. Many of the warriors involved in the 860 expedition were likely newcomers, bands of adventurers drawn by wealth. Their arrival may have intensified competition and disrupted existing political structures. Archaeological evidence supports this. Staraya Ladoga was destroyed between approximately 863 and 871. Fires devastated Gorodishchi and other settlements. The Volkhov Basin experienced widespread destruction. Whether these events were part of a single wave or repeated crises is unclear. But their consequences were profound: political upheaval, possible regime changes, and the disappearance of the Byzantine mission, with no further record of clergy among the Rus for nearly a century. Despite the violence, trade did not collapse. In fact, it may have been fueled by instability. Wealth, especially silver, became a key driver of power. Accumulating treasure allowed leaders to attract followers, elevate their social status, consolidate authority. One of the most important commodities in this system was deeply troubling: slaves. The trade in enslaved people, exchanged for Islamic dirhams, was central to the economy and inherently linked to coercion and violence. Yet there were limits. Constant, uncontrolled conflict threatened the delicate network of trade routes and settlements. These networks relied on cooperation between central emporia and peripheral suppliers, especially those providing furs, the most valuable commodity. This tension between profit and instability likely pushed societies toward greater political organization. Following this turbulent period, signs of renewed order began to emerge. In Staraya Ladoga, a citadel surrounded by limestone slabs was constructed. A Scandinavian-style warrior elite established a separate cemetery. A large, great hall was built in the 890s, possibly as a princely residence. These developments suggest a deliberate effort to strengthen defenses and central authority, perhaps in response to new Scandinavian threats. Meanwhile, Gorodishchi also recovered. construction expanded into lower, wetter ground. Workshops produced metal goods, including brooches and weapons. Trade goods from the east, silver, glass beads, circulated widely. Technological changes also appeared, such as the transition to wheel-thrown pottery, indicating increasing specialization and sophistication. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment and share this video. The population of these centers was far from uniform. The ruling elite, nobles, warriors, and princely families, were likely of Scandinavian origin. However, the majority of artisans and laborers were Slavs and Finnic peoples, often from distant regions. This blending of cultures was a defining feature. Scandinavian elites dominated politically and militarily. Local populations sustained production and trade. Other centers, such as Pskov, reflected similar diversity, though the presence of wealthy, armed Scandinavians remained constant. By the late 9th century, new settlements emerged along the Upper Volga. Many were founded by newcomers from regions like the Åland Islands. These groups were drawn by profitable fur trade opportunities, fertile lands near lakes such as Nero and Pleshivo, established connections to northern hunting regions. Their maritime skills allowed them to navigate extensive river networks, linking them to distant markets. At the same time, a powerful political structure developed along the Middle Volga under the Bulgar Khan. This state collected tribute and controlled trade, connected river routes to overland caravan networks, linked northern Europe to Central Asia. The Samanids, in particular, played a crucial role by minting vast quantities of silver dirhams, which flooded these trade networks. Rus groups quickly took advantage of this. Islamic coins became widespread in their territories. Silver circulated easily, reducing the need for rigid political control. As a result, these eastern networks remained relatively flexible and decentralized. While the Volga offered wealth, the Dnieper offered opportunity. By the late 9th century, northern groups began settling in the Middle Dnieper region, especially in Kiev. These settlers retained strong Scandinavian cultural traits and were likely identified as Rus. Kiev's importance grew rapidly. It became a key node between northern resources and southern markets. It allowed navigation past dangerous rapids to the Black Sea. It connected directly to Byzantine trade. Settlements expanded, with wooden structures built along riverbanks, often serving as workshops and storage facilities. Within a short time, these groups established diplomatic relations with Byzantium. Agreements allowed them to trade tax-free in Constantinople, enter the city under regulated conditions, receive food, lodging, and supplies. A formal treaty in 911 further established legal procedures, demonstrating a significant level of political organization. The emergence of treaties and diplomatic continuity suggests the existence of structured leadership. Envoys involved in agreements with Byzantium bore distinctly Nordic names, reinforcing the Scandinavian influence among elites. At the same time, political culture showed clear signs of external influence, particularly from the Khazars. The title, Khagan. Systems of dual rule, symbolic elements like the trident. Descriptions from Arab observers in the early 10th century provide vivid imagery of Rus leadership. A ruler seated on a grand throne, surrounded by warriors and enslaved attendants, supported by a large retinue willing to die for him. This combination of wealth, military loyalty, and symbolic authority reflects a complex and evolving political system. Despite growing organization, the Rus world was not unified. Different regions developed distinct characteristics. The Volga networks remained decentralized. Northern centers retained strong military potential. Kiev emerged as a diplomatic and hub. These groups may have shared cultural and political ties, but they also pursued independent interests. Some may even have paid tribute to the Khazars, highlighting overlapping spheres of influence. The period between 860 and 871 was marked by instability, violence, and disruption. Settlements burned, political regimes shifted, and external influences reshaped local dynamics. Yet from this turmoil emerged something new. Trade networks expanded rather than collapsed. Wealth, especially silver, circulated widely. Cultural interactions intensified, blending Scandinavian, Slavic, Finnic, and steppe influences. Most importantly, the foundations of political structure began to take shape: fortified centers, organized elites, diplomatic relations, legal agreements. What began as a fragmented and unstable landscape gradually evolved into a more cohesive system, one that would define the early history of the Rus. In the end, instability was not merely destructive, it was transformative.